So just some fast facts about Mindanao. I think you're probably, or most of you are probably familiar with these facts. It is the second largest island in the country, has a large population of about 24 million people. But I guess what I wanted to point out in this slide is that historically, Mindanao's economy has been based on agriculture. If you can see on the left, this graph shows that most of the high-value crops that are coming out of the Philippines come out of Mindanao. So it really is the food basket of the country. But when you fast forward to today, I guess Mindanao has more legs to grow, or more legs to stand on. A lot of the growth is coming not just from the agricultural sector, but more from services. When we talk about services, this includes real estate, BPOs, financial services, etc. There's also been a lot of growth in industry. So now you have several industries that the whole region can really stand on. So when you talk about an area of about 24 million people, region-wide it's growing at about 6.4%. However, the Davao region is growing at a faster pace at about 9.4%. And with, I guess, the lion's share of the national budget going to Mindanao, and in particular Region 11, then that really translates into many, many opportunities, not just for real estate, but for a lot of industries across the board. When we talk about Davao, Davao has been growing at over 9% for the last couple of years. And I guess one point that I'd like to make here is that it didn't happen in 2016. It didn't happen when our mayor became the president. We had started to see a lot of this growth probably about 10 years ago, somewhere around 2008, 2009, when there was a lot of big developers from Manila that had made major investments into the region, and a lot of other smaller investments followed thereafter. So the region has been growing for quite a long time. When we look at the market, Davao City has a population of about 1.8 million people in the daytime. But for most investors in the region, when we look at the size of the population, we look at the Davao region, which is about 5 million people. So it really makes for a very interesting market. Now, it's bigger than actually most other major cities in the country today. And just wanted to put your attention on the pie chart that we have here. And it's surprising to see is that the services sector actually makes up more than half of the economic contribution in the Davao region today, whereas before this was primarily agriculture. But don't get me wrong, agriculture still plays an extremely important role in our economy and in our local economy today. And of course, I have to say that because in our case, our company's main business is still actually agriculture. So I guess the question that a lot of people have is, so where is this growth coming from? So really, what is driving these numbers? I mentioned earlier that manufacturing, real estate and services is really growing, but also the BPO space, no? Because of this a very highly educated population in the Davao region. Davao has been considered a top-tier city for the BPO industry for quite a number of years now. There's also going to be, there has been, and there's going to be a boost in public spending for infrastructure. Of course, that's really the big question on everybody's mind is that, I guess it's not if, but when is the infrastructure spend going to happen? And as we understand, Davao will get a very large share of the infrastructure budget. And also, for once, we actually have an energy surplus in Mindanao. So just about 2 years ago, we turned from a deficit to a surplus. And I guess it also is a good sign when you see a lot of these major energy players putting up large-scale power plants in Mindanao. So even, I guess they're putting the development ahead of the demand. And of course, our location within Bimpiaga or in the ASEAN growth corridor. So when we look at now, I guess, the real estate space, so what in particular is really driving the real estate sector in Mindanao? So we identified about 5 different areas. First would be the increase for, I guess, the concept of live, work, play development. So this is something that is certainly not new to the country. Most of the big developers, Mega World, Ayala, etc., have been doing this for quite some time. But when you look at a lot of the new developments now in Davao and in the region, they are implementing this concept as well. I mentioned a lot of times earlier about the BPO space. So most of the new office space that is being taken up in Davao City is being taken up by BPO companies as well. Flexible workspace. So this is something that's actually quite new to Davao, and it's something that we were quite surprised that it would be taken up so positively. Our company actually went into a partnership with Regis Business Center, and we set this up about 2 years ago. And to date, it is actually still the largest Regis Center in the country today at 1,600 square meters. And it's also one of the most successful at a 92% take-up rate in only 2 years. So it's also showing what kind of investments are working and what kind of investments will continue to work in the Davao region. There's also we see a lot of growth of industrial parks now outside of the Calabarzon area. So as we all know, most of, I would say probably 70, 80% of industrial companies or exporters are located in Calabarzon. But now there's a concerted effort to really establish more industrial parks, not to replace the existing ones, but in addition to the ones that we have today. So I think it was PEZA's goal to try to have one major industrial park in every city or every municipality in the country. And so there are several of them that are coming up in the Davao region today. And of course, with all of this growth, tourism was talked about at great length earlier. This is, I guess, another sector that will be driving the real estate space in the Davao region. So I guess the question is, for a homegrown company such as us, how do we figure into all of this? So I guess just to talk a little bit about our company and where we came from and what we do. Our company, Damosa Land, we pride ourselves on being a homegrown real estate developer, focused mainly on Mindanao. We are part of a larger group called the Anflacor Group, which is actually 80% is really based on agribusiness still. So real estate is one of our more emerging sectors, if you will. But I guess just a little bit of history on this one slide. The reason I'm putting this up there is that a lot of people ask me, what does Damosa mean? I mean, it is a bit of an unusual name. But the word Damosa came from actually the first company that my grandfather set up in Mindanao in the late 1940s. And the name of that company was Davao Motor Sales, or Damosa. So we were a car dealership. One of his early businesses was that he distributed Ford vehicles in the Philippines. He started it in Mindanao and eventually distributed all over the country until about the 1980s when Ford exited the country. Shortly thereafter, we kind of transitioned the company from being a car dealership into a real estate company, hence the name Damosa Land. And I guess you could say the rest was history. So that's just a little bit about us and a little bit about our history. To date, we've leased out about 43,000 or over 43,000 square meters of space. This is office space, commercial space, etc. We've also built out about 1,300 homes and condominiums. We've also have been able to bring in about 40 locators into our IT parks and our industrial parks. This is some of the projects that we have today. This is our residential subdivision project in Davao City. We're also doing condominiums. We're also doing commercial space leasing, not just in Davao City, but also in General Santos. And one thing that we really pride ourselves on is considering ourselves enablers of growth. And I guess what do we mean by this? Aside from, I guess, simply just being a real estate company, one thing that we always advocate is how can we bring in more investment into Mindanao? How can we attract more companies to come in so to help the region grow? So some of our projects that we've set up, we set up the first PEZA accredited IT park in southern Mindanao. This was way back in 2007. So this is in Davao City. It's about 100% leased out already. And through this initiative, we've been able to attract some of these, I guess, a couple big names here. As you can see, there's some large local companies such as SGV, and also a host of international companies who have set up their regional offices with us, shipping lines such as APL, SITC, OOCL, etc. We also have large agribusiness companies such as Dole. And as I mentioned earlier, we brought in the Regis Business Center, and because of that, we are able to bring in a lot of technology-based companies as well. So we actually have a good, I guess, a good selection of different kinds of industries that are located within our IT park. We've also brought in some other international brands. So in the tourism space, Microtel is our partner for our hotels. We have one in Davao City and one in Jensan. And I mentioned earlier, we did partner with Regis Business Center, and it's one of our one of our most successful investments to date. We also built out the first world-class industrial park in the Davao region. So this is actually a current photo. We completed our first phase actually just last year, and to date we've sold about 60% of the inventory. So right now a lot of the investors that have come in are starting to build up their factories. Our first locator had his first export actually in January of this year. So I guess the reason that we also love this project is that it's also building a new industry in that part of the country. Manufacturing and exporting is something that has been limited to Luzon and Cebu or the Visayas for quite some time. So hopefully this will really become a catalyst for more manufacturing companies in our part of the country. Just to show some of our other projects, this is a project that we actually launched this year. It's called Agria. This is an 88-hectare master plan project. And the reason I'm also highlighting this and why we find it so interesting is that the heart and soul of this project is agriculture. So we immediately saw that, you know, we will never be able to get away from agriculture. It is still going to be a very important driver for our country. So this project is going to have agriculture as the main theme of everything it does. And so we wanted to stay true to that agricultural heritage, not just of the region, but also of us. And so in fact, the anchor locator that we have for this project is the University of the Philippines. And we signed a MOA with them last year for them to put up a UP Professional School for Agriculture and the Environment. And so we're hoping that in the next 1 or 2 years that we will have our first batch of students. And we also love our tourism play. So we're also developing on Samal Island. Samal Island is the island that's right across from Davao City. I guess you can liken it to Mactan and Cebu. So this is something that we also we will be breaking ground on this year. And so it'll be a combination of tourism and residential and some commercial components. And another major project, since we have already leased out about 99% of our office space in the city, we will be adding at least another 20,000 square meters of space starting within this year. So I guess I just wanted to end the last few slides also to show what is happening in the real estate space across all of the other developers. And so if you look at this slide up here, it's really a who's who of the big real estate developers who have actually been in the Davao region for quite some time. So Ayala Land, they're making their, I would say this is probably considered their third or fourth major investment in the city. DMCI has been there for quite some time, and of course, especially since they also have roots in Davao. Mega World is building I think 12 to 14 building project, which is actually very close to where our projects are. And of course, companies such as Philinvest, Vistaland, and also now companies actually from Cebu. So Cebu Landmasters has broken ground on 2 major projects in the city. So if you have been thinking about whether it's the right time to invest, I would still think it would be a good time to invest, but to be honest, it is getting a little bit crowded. But aside from the national developers, one thing that we also like to see is that the local developers a lot of them have really stepped up their game and have been able to develop alongside the national developers. And so it's really been good for everybody. You have here, these are some projects across Mindanao where the local developers have decided to try to, I guess, stand their ground or to make major investments alongside the national developers as well. These are just some of the brands that you'll see in Davao and in the region today. And finally, I guess the question about infrastructure. We've always, as I mentioned earlier, the question is, when are these infrastructure projects going to happen? These are some of the major projects that we believe are on the table. The Mindanao Railway, there's been a lot has been said about this project. Airport modernization, seaport modernization, a host of many bypass roads within the city. So what we've been made to understand is that these will break ground within the year and hopefully will happen within the term of our current president. And so why this is important to us is that the growth that we've seen in the region happened before any of this was even discussed. So we can just imagine that when all of these infrastructure projects will be implemented, then that will only mean, I guess, upwards for all of our projects. So it's something to be excited about, something to think about for future investors such as yourself. So I'll just leave you with, just in one word, I think it's Mindanao. It's a bit of an overused term, but we really believe that now is the time to invest. In some cases, people would consider themselves late to the game, but I think that with a lot of the attributes that we talked about or that I talked about today, there is still room to grow and there is still room to invest. So with that, I'd just like to say thank you and good afternoon.